So we have understood how to declare a class method and what made class variables differ with instance variables and we have also seen the usage of @class method. Now let's understand the third method, which is static method, because we use another decorator called as @static method. It's simple. When you see static methods, that mainly are used when we try to process at the class level, but we don't want to involve any class or instances. We just try to use this kind of method in such cases like setting environment variables or counting number of instances, and also when we go for changing an attribute in another class, we can make use this static method where implicitly we need not mention any argument. That's where static methods are very vital. When you hear the word static, what does that mean? It doesn't flow anywhere, right? When if you see static website, there is nothing like any login or anything. You just scroll the data, you scroll the web page. Same, relate every definition when you see in Python related to English terminology, it will be very much easier, right? Remember, when you go for static method, you use this decorator, and to make it more easy to understand, we'll be going for our practice part, right? So let me continue in the same shell which I have defined. So I'll just keep this above program comment and I'll go for executing, right? So when we go for static methods, these are used only when processing is at class level, right? These are used when some processing related to class but does not need the class or instances. Make it simple. Static methods, because this is very important, because easily we can understand difference between class method and instance method, but static methods are bit more tricky, but let's make it very easy, because static methods they don't need any class or instances, does not need class or its instances, it doesn't need any class or its instances to perform any task. That's where we generally use it, right? We only use the decorator. It is related to when processing is related to the class but does not need class or its instance to perform any task. So for this, let's take a simple program to create a static method. To create a static method where we try to count the number of instances counted for a class, and then created for a class. Then we'll go for another example where we try to make it by taking user input. So to create a static method that counts the number of instances created for a class. Let me just go for that. So for this, let's take a very simple logic where we'll be generally using the same thing in real case also. When you try to go for counting number of instances happen and setting environment variables, as I have mentioned. So I make my class name as my class itself. I don't want to define anything. So this is the variable you declare below the class is basically a class variable. I initialize the value as 0 because my task is to count the number of instances, right? Then what do I do is I define a constructor. So this constructor that increments our n value. So always when you go for incrementing, don't remember plus plus. Plus plus is only in C. In Python you go for plus is equal to, that is addition increment. So that increments n when an instance is created. So for that we'll use a very simple logic. Just make sure that you got that logic. So define double underscore init, double underscore, that is under init method. So the first argument is always self. So here what I do is I'll directly take my class dot n is equal to, here my class dot n is basically where we try to write, just we are declaring our argument, that is when a variable n every time when I increment it, how should that increment it? My class dot n plus 1, that's it. A is equal to a plus equal to 1, right? Just remember this logic. When you relate a plus is equal to 1, that is same thing, a equal to a plus 1. But here I am taking the help of your variable because n is every time incremented. So just make sure that you declare a static method to display the number of instances. So to display the number of instances, I try to declare my method as static because Without writing constructor also you can define. Even you can include constructor, class method, everything. That's what I have shown you, right, in the previous example. Now I'll make my method as static by using decorator as @static method. See, the color should change. For decorators, the colors change. Even the same color is for the built-in functions. Now I define a method as number of objects. So NO of objects, right? So obviously the no need of any argument here, because that's where static methods doesn't need anything, because they don't go for processing, because they doesn't relate to any class or its instances. So I directly pass it here. But how do you get the result? Obviously I'll write a print statement only. It's very simple. So number of instances created, that's my print. So what is the variable you're trying to fetch here? Fetch the variable my class dot n, because dot n will carry the value, not my class. My class is your class name. You can write your own name, right? It's up to you. Now what I do is I create 3 instances. So I should get the value as 3, number of instances created. So I create 3 instances. So it's simple. Again, create an object, the same process every time. So I create 3 instances. First thing I like to give as object 1. obj1 is equal to, my class name is my class of. So first time I should get the result as 1, right? Let me prove it whether we are getting or not. There is nothing result. Why? You did not call the my number of objects class, right? How do you get the result? Always remember, when you call the method only you can see the result. Number of objects as, you should get the print as, oh, string object has no attribute my class. Why we are getting this error? Let me show you. Because I gave it as my class only, because that's where clearly we need to find out the result. Because number of objects, you just see the result where it is throwing. Number of instances created, string object has no attribute my class. That means we are making some mistake when we are trying to increment. That is unable to fetch the result. My class dot n equal to my class dot n plus 1. We are making this a static method. Number of instances. See, where is the comma? That's where you are finding mistake, right? This is a string, right? Always be sure when you are printing the result. Now call the method my class dot. Obviously, what is the method? Number of objects. Call the method. You see, number of instances created are 1. Simple. Always see whatever you are writing print. This is a string. And now create one more object. obj2 is equal to my class. And again create one more method. obj3 is equal to my class. Right? Now, if you want to see the result, obviously you should take the class along with the method. So my class dot, what is the method? You can see number of objects. There you go. Now clearly you can see it is being counting, because n is 0 for the first time. 0 plus 1, the value will be 1, n value will be 1. Again it comes to the increment of the next object, again increment it. So the final value will be 3. Number of instances created are 3. That's where we have taken this static method, because generally we have written a constructor that increments the class variable n every time. That's what we are using, that is addition increment. The same logic we have defined in the previous program also, right? This increment is always displayed by the number of objects method. This is the method which we try to declare or display the number of instances. That's where I made the method as static. Okay, what happens if I don't, if I keep this as comment? You see the result now. See, you are getting the same result. That's what static method will do. You can just understand, because you already defined the constructor here, because static method does not need class. If you declare this, you will understand what made that thing so much special, because here constructor and your increment is happening at the rate static, because static method is something like when you don't want to process the result at the class level itself. You are not involving anything. That is the clear difference. Now, let's take one more logic. If you try to understand that thing by taking input from user instead of writing constructor, right? Here we need not, there is no need of class or object. Hence, we can write the static method directly. So, we try to accept a number from the keyboard. That means I'm not declaring any input argument. So, that is where I try to write a program, Python program to create a static method. Python program to create a static method, generally to find out the square root that calculates square root value of a given number. So how do you do that? You can do in two ways, by writing the logic as double star 0.5, or you have math module, no? Yes, now I want to use the math module also. Value of a given number, because clearly remember, when you're working on static method, it doesn't require any processing with the class or any of its instances. It does on its own. That's where in the above example, even if I keep the comment, you got the result, and I have declared the constructor that will initialize the objects there, and how you can easily understand the difference. Now I'll write a static method where my thing is to find out the square root value. Static method to find square root value. So how do you try to define? Just declare a class. What do you do over there? You just define the class, but before that, square root is from math module, right? So I declare my class name as sample, and I try to make it a static method. Instead of writing any constructor or class variable, I'm just making the method as static. It's not status, it's static. Yes. Now just you want to calculate the result, right? So just define a method. The method name is calculate, where I want to take input from user, not myself. So what is the result you want to take? How do you get the result? You want to find out the square root, right? So just make sure you get the logic, that is math dot, from math module import the square root function, math dot square root of x, and as it is a method, just return the result to it. That's it. Now you can accept input from user, whether you run from here or you just write the script or run from shell, it's up to you, but I'll write the code here itself. Accept input from user, where you are asking number, whether you want to give number in float or integer, it's up to you. I want to give whether it will take in float or not, whether it will give integer, it's up to you. So I take float only, enter a value. How does this will be calculated? When you initialize the object to a class, obviously call the static method. So call the static method and pass the number to it. That's what you're trying to do now. So whether you take an object or whether you directly call calculate sample dot calculate of number, it's fine. Anything sample dot, it automatically need to fetch this calculate method, sample dot calculate of number. Save, and when you execute this, enter a value, I'll give 5. You're not seeing the result. Why? Because where did you print it? Did you print anywhere? No, right? You made the print. Did you take the input directly from user? There is no print here. So what I think, I can just give like this, and let me try to fetch the result. Enter a value 5. There you go. You got the square root value, because you are creating an object to this class, and instead of this, I want to customize my print, where I want to just format it by just formatting decimal values, where I just give in this way, the square root of curly brace is curly brace, and I also want to give 2 decimal float values, right? That's what I wanted to give. Even you can use percentile format or whatever it is. I am trying to go for dot format method, because always print is at the user point. What is the first thing to be taken here? First is number, because we are taking input from user and the result is storing in res. There you go. I'll just remove the comment also, where you can easily understand. Now you will get 2 results in the output. Enter a value 5. There you go. The first one is with all the float values, and the second one is 2.24, because we have asked only for 2 decimal places. That is how you can see the static method, where you are not declaring any implicit argument over there. There is no constructor, no self argument. That's where you will clearly understand static methods are used when processing is only at the class level, but we are not involving any class or instances. That is the advantage of static method. Always remember, based on the user necessity only, we try to go for whether it is at the class level, or we try to go with the instance method, or by writing constructor, or if we want to have processing only at the class level, we can directly go for the static methods.